history. This land is the ancestral and unceded territory of the Algonquin Anishinaabe Nation. We are grateful to the Algonquin ancestors who cared for the land and water in order that we might meet here today. We are also grateful to the Algonquin people for their contribution in the making of the Rideau Canal, which runs through Smith Falls. Okay, are there any additions to the agenda?
Just a reminder about Pedal Fest on June the 15th.
Okay.
This committee could be involved in part of that. And just the other things we'll get to roundtable.
Roundtable, okay.
Okay.
So if I can recommend the motion that the agenda be approved as circulated? Moved by Nate, seconded by Sue. All in favor? And carried. Okay, and then were there any amendments to the minutes that anybody had? Okay, so I recommend the motion that the minutes of the working group meeting on April 9th be approved as circulated. Moved by Nate, seconded by Sean. All in favor? Okay, motion carried. Excellent. Do we have any disclosure of monetary interest? None noted. Okay. Perfect. So we'll move on to priority issues. Richard, I'm assuming it's you that's up?
Yes, ma'am. Yep.
Okay. Go right ahead.
Okay. So one, I want to apologize for the lateness of the report, but I'll give a quick summary. So last meeting we were discussing what possible areas we could include in our assessment criteria for the milestone 1 for the community portion. So MCM, well PCP, they use a scopes framework. So they have 3 scopes where we're looking at measuring our greenhouse gas emissions. So the first scope is the territorial section where it deals with all the emissions generated within the boundary of Smith Falls. Now when you look at scope 2 would be looking at the grid supplied energy sources resulting from electricity, heat, steam, or any other cooling within the municipality's boundaries. Now, electricity use is often the largest source of scope 2 emissions, which occurs when buildings and facilities consume electricity from local, regional, or national electricity grids. So the difference between scope 1 and scope 2 when it looks at electricity consumption is that scope 2 measures greenhouse gas emissions from energy consumption supplied from the grid from all sources that come outside of the municipality. So for example, if we had our own electricity grid, it'd be scope 1. But because we're getting electricity from outside, it's going to be scope 2, and so that's why that differentiation is there. Now looking at scope 3, scope 3 is classified as out of boundary sources, meaning that all other greenhouse gas emissions are occurring outside of the municipality's boundaries. So emissions included in scope 3 range from the portion of trans-boundary journeys. So this is specific to, let's say that we had an airport or a train station that was outside of our boundaries but used often by residents. So we'd be measuring consumption travel from, say, the airlines or the railway station. So that's sort of the reason for that, as well as if we have any mining operations or any other, say, agricultural uses that we would benefit from, but they're generally outside of our boundaries. So that's the rationale for using scope 3. If you look at the attachment for Appendix 2, which kind of shows you scope 1 and scope 2, scope 3, it sort of like generally breaks down what the additional aspects. So in the green, we have what you would call the basic. So for our records, we're using the basic reporting level, which basically includes scope 1 and scope 2 and some of scope 3. So looking at the breakdown here, so for, let's say, stationary energy, a lot of it's really captured in scope 1 and scope 2. There is a possibility to expand for looking at stationary energy for scope 3, but that implies that we're looking at grid supplied energy sources for stationary things like, say, residential buildings outside of our boundaries. So in terms of the criteria, it's only a possibility that we would look to expand our area of influence, but it doesn't really seem necessary. This is just extra. Looking at transportation, There's a possibility to look at scope 3 for transportation, so that would be relating to, say, on-road traffic, railways, waterborne navigation, and aviation. But that would mean that we have to develop a methodology for calculating emissions for, say, the railways and for the airports and for any sort of waterborne navigation. So it could be possible to, say, measure it for, let's say, people traveling from the boat or people using the Smith Falls Airport, but that would require a survey of all uses. So that's sort of the challenge in trying to capture things for transportation that would be starting, say, outside of Smith Falls and coming through. So in terms of the overall picture, essentially we'd be just widening our perspective in terms of where the emissions are occurring. Looking at waste, typically a lot of the waste is generated in town but treated outside. So that's why it's a scope 3, because it's treated outside but we create it here. So we're looking at essentially the consumption related to the use for energy coming from outside. Now there's a section called industrial processes and product use. That's usually related to any sort of mining facilities or any sort of aggregate sources essentially that's being processed. Typically they're not within the town's boundary. So if we had a mining facility, that's where we'd be looking at measuring emissions for scope 3. Looking at agricultural, forestry, and other land use, it's the same concept. If we had a forestry section in town, or if we had agricultural uses that would be on the periphery of the boundary of our town, then we'd be looking at scope 3 as a means of measuring. Now, for agricultural, forestry, and other land uses, we do have wetlands. Now, it is possible to attempt at measuring the greenhouse gas emissions generated from those sources, but at this time, it's unclear exactly what kind of process we'd use. And in speaking with, say, Lanark County, who also had a climate action plan, they didn't have the resources to measure at that time. So it is possible, but more work would be needed to look into how we would measure exactly the greenhouse gas emissions from wetlands. And the one reason why you would consider measuring it from the wetlands is that if you look at the climate action plan as a budget for how much greenhouse gas emissions we're using, the wetlands would be a means of reducing our emissions. So basically we're bringing down how much we're using overall. So that's the only benefit really. So unlike, say, forestry or agriculture, where human activity is generating greenhouse gas emissions, wetlands typically are reducing greenhouse gas emissions. So that's the only bonus there. And then other scope 3 are anything outside of what's not already captured. So that is the short and sweet version of the scope 1, scope 2, and scope 3. In Appendix A, there is a diagram that kind of breaks it down a little bit easier in terms of what scope 3 really means.
Can I just add something to that?
Sure.
I was confused looking at this one, the one that the
It's a little more
CPC
comprehensive.
gave out. Yeah. And I realized, because I found the question, this isn't your fault at all, it's not a criticism, it's just the way that they did this. I was looking at the check marks and I was like, why does it look like much more is covered in scope 1 than scope 3? But just in terms of a big Coles note of what you just described, basically it's small, medium, large in terms of your carbon footprint. Are we just looking at the easiest to measure stuff in town? Are we looking at slightly larger, or are we trying to capture the entirety of our greenhouse gas footprint?
Right.
And to capture the entirety of it is scope 3, right?
Right, precisely.
So and in terms of we were in contact with what's the name of the organization? It's
PCP.
It's PCP.
Yep.
Okay. So we were in contact with the PCP in terms of asking, is there other municipalities that have tried to do an analysis of the total carbon footprint? And there's 3 major examples. And do you have the sheet that I gave you that breaks down what that looks like? But anyway, I sent it. I can forward it to everyone. But basically, what we did was we modeled what the food footprint would be, not based on Smiths Falls specifically, but just on a per capita analysis. So we took the 3 other municipalities that have tried to quantify what their footprint is from food, and we just averaged that, and then figured out the per capita of that, and then charted that, and that's good enough to do a scope 3 on food. Like we don't have to spend any money. It doesn't have to be more complicated. We can just take the notes from other municipalities that have done it. the subject of trying to get in emissions from things like our wetlands is a little more tricky because literally no municipality has actually attempted that for wild, for any kind of wild environment. Now, technically, our wetlands aren't a wild environment. They've been there for a long time, but they're human-made, and they do have a pretty significant methane footprint. So there is some mitigation to be done there. There's only one other municipality that is currently attempting it. I think it's called, is it Sochi? It's the one in BC.
Yeah, I can't pronounce the name.
Yeah, I
I
can't
honestly
remember their
wouldn't
name.
do
I've never heard
justice.
of that, but it's a small municipality that is being bold, and they're trying to actually capture everything. But yeah, it's a relatively short list of municipalities that are trying to do what I'm suggesting we do, which is the Scope 3 version of it. That's all I wanted to add. Yeah.
I would say that though there is merit in measuring, say, greenhouse gas emissions for wetlands, this doesn't necessarily have to happen at the stage, as in we could complete milestone 1 and still have recommendations relating to wetland reductions, and when we update it next year, we can include it. So,
I'll just throw this in. So we just hosted an event at Lanark County, specifically on having the county develop a natural heritage plan. And that was driven by our interest in wetlands and wetlands as sequestering of carbon. So it certainly appears that the county is going to develop a natural heritage system. That's going to take a little bit of time anyway. I'd certainly strongly recommend that we build into our plan wetlands, but that we look to the county and the county's plan for that information, rather than making it a burden for us to do. And that we build in the protection of wetlands in Smiths Falls so that we don't see the deterioration of wetlands and the release of methane.
So I know that the county every so often they sort of measure wetlands because that's the kind of like their conservation efforts. I don't think in Smith Falls we're seeing necessarily a reduction of our own wetlands, but I think in terms of managing it, making sure that they stay where they are is also important as well.
And just to clarify, an intact wetland will still emit methane. Like a
Right, of
perfectly
course.
wild ecosystem doing nothing wrong can still have. It's the second largest emitter of methane next to the fossil fuel industry. It's enormous. It's just naturally occurring.
But it's also a great storage system.
Indeed.
Too. So,
Indeed.
Yeah.
Now,
You're the chair. You can
Go ahead, Peter.
Simon Lunn, retired biologist from Parks Canada, may have more information on wetlands.
Oh, that's good.
Okay.
He's a local contact, I guess.
I doubt, however, they have much data on greenhouse gases because he would be before that era.
Right.
But in terms of resources, they used to have a lot. In fact, when Rio started looking at wetlands, they were the primary source that we consult with.
Right, so they're very technical expert essentially.
Yeah.
Okay, good.
And I mapped the area of the wetland, so we could pick a number based on like averages of naturally or man-made occurring wetlands. Throw that number on it now, similar to what we did with the food, and just call it good. And like you said, if, at a later date, if we develop the capacity to actually measure our wetland, we can update that number. But just like as a placeholder, we can put a best guess at what it is.
Okay.
And basically, all of these are municipalities doing that. Like literally, there isn't an example of a municipality generating their own data on greenhouse gases. It's all taking studies, taking reports, and doing a best guess estimate. I would volunteer to do that if you guys want to do a scope 3 for the wetlands.
Well, I'm sorry, I want to
Go ahead.
jump in. I mean, certainly if we want to do it, Nate, but I really do think that through the county's process, this is going to be looked at pretty extensively through the development of the natural heritage strategy, and why not participate with that? So,
I'll have to follow up with them and see like what their stages are and seeing like how we can get involved at that time.
yeah, I don't know if there's a formal way for the town to be engaged with that process.
I think we would have to. because if there's a cost to scope that out, they probably want us to bear that cost. I don't know. But then again, is it simply if Nate's able to take the, I guess, the overhead view and outline and measure the area, square meters, I guess we would have wetlands. Once a county has developed its methodology, then it'd be a matter of maybe overlaying one over the other to determine really right. So we may not have to be fully involved, but I think the methodology and the research done to support that would obviously make our job easier here. Because I don't know, honestly, I don't know how difficult it would be or how easy it would be to determine that today if it really no one's really got down that road yet.
I could do it by the end of the day.
So,
Yeah?
Yeah, it's nothing, honestly. Like we've already measured the area, and I forwarded you a study already
Yeah.
that showed like there's an analysis because all wetlands are currently producing more and more methane, and that's really the deal with methane. It's not about total amount; it's about net increases. So all of the natural wetlands are currently like one of the largest threats, and so there's all sorts of data showing different levels, and it depends on the nature of the wetland and how acidic the soil is, but of all of the types of wetlands that are a concern, the one that scores the highest on methane are what they call human engineered wetlands, which is what we have 90 acres of. And so it's, yeah.
that's what I wanted to ask you on, because how do you know it's man-made? Is there an indication?
Yeah, it's the history of the logs. That whole, there's even a tree stump right in the middle of it that you can know like the day that they flooded the area, but that used to be a farmer's field. It's like, the Reader Roundtable does these tours where you go around and they tell you the history, but it used to be a field and they flooded it to make the logs.
Crazy.
Also, like the
Okay.
oxygenation thing, because it used to be a waterfall, they used to be heavily oxygenated, and it's anaerobic environments that create methane.
Yes,
and
right.
so when we removed the waterfall, we created an environment that's much more conducive to methanthropes.
Learn something new every day, huh?
If I can just be clear, are you advocating the removal of those wetlands?
No, oxygenating them.
So, okay. So we're not going to the point of saying because they release methane, they need to be drained.
No, they need to be remediated. There's minor tweaks you can do to, and for a system that's been engineered
It's
anyways,
very interesting.
tweaking the engineering I think makes a lot of sense.
So wait, now we're talking about remediation. I think we're losing track. So I know measuring is one thing. Would remediation be, I guess, a recommendation for the action plan?
So in the thing that I circulated, the menu of options, one of the options is just oxygenating that waterway, which just means literally bubblers. And if you remove the anaerobic zone from the bottom, the area that produces methane goes away. And that won't permeate into like the wet soil that's a little further inland, but the bulk of the waterway, if it was just more oxygenated, would produce less methane. And when you do that, you also encourage fish populations, because fish populations are large, and also the ability for it to digest contaminants and nitrogen and stuff. All of that is increased when you add oxygen.
Yeah, the swale is an artificial wetland.
I had no idea.
Yeah.
I thought a part of it was artificial based on our presence here, but I didn't know that the whole thing was.
Sue?
Yeah, if I can just add though, artificial in the sense that they've been created historically, right? So now what you have in the provincial policy statement, right?
Yeah.
That guides development, is you have the capacity for a developer to make a proposal and to say that they're going to drain a particular wetland, and then all they're required to do is to create a new wetland of 3 times the volume
A wetland
of the
compensation
original
strategy.
one. And we know that that is nowhere near enough, right? And so I just want to be very clear that we're not going down the path here saying that in Smiths Falls we're going to do away with wetlands, and that in fact we need to be protecting all of the existing wetlands. That's
I think we're all on the same page here, Sue. Yeah, it's good.
So Madam Chair, I guess do we want to provide direction, I guess, to Nate if he's willing to put this together? And with time and effort into it. He said you're done before the end of the day.
Yeah, so I've already done the food. We could add the wetland, And then the only remaining ones are, there's healthcare, which I think we can just go with national numbers for. It's like 5%. Yeah, you found that. Thanks for doing that. And then the other one's waste. And like we can just pull the numbers that the organization offers for waste. They have it. They're not verified. And again, like later on, it would be nice to go and actually take some measurements on this. But between those, it would be done. Like these are all numbers we're just pulling from other things. I could have it ready by our next meeting.
So I understand the wetlands component because that would be under one section. If you're looking at adding healthcare, how would you define that? Because that would be under other scope 3. So what would you call that? Because it can't just be healthcare. It has to have something a little more specific.
Yeah. So she actually found a great link that like really broke it down. Canada's got the craziest carbon footprint for healthcare of any developed nation.
Okay.
But I would just like to keep it real simple. I would just take those numbers and break it down per capita.
Okay.
So you calculate how much of the average Canadian's footprint is for healthcare stuff. Calculate how many of those Canadians are living here, and that's your number.
Okay, fair. So what would be the outcome in like having that data? Because usually it relates to some sort of recommendation in the action plan. So it needs to be a link between that number and what we're trying to achieve.
And that's what I would push back at. Like, I think a lot of municipalities have approached it with that, where they only want to see the problem, they have a tool to solve. And I don't think that makes sense for climate change. I think what we need to start with, if we're actually talking about getting to net zero, we need to know what our footprint is, including the parts that we don't see an easy solution for. Because for one, part of the solution, like you get as close as you can to neutral by reducing your footprint, and then the rest of it is offsets. It's the trees that you plant. It's the ways that you figure out, you know. And so, like, yeah, like I imagine that we're going to be able to do next to nothing about our healthcare footprint. So that part's going to have to come out of the trees we plant and the funguses we grow.
I see.
You know what I'm saying? And like same and. The other thing in terms of trying to do these projections, like it's, you know, if you set a 10-year time horizon, that's only like part way to that net zero goal. So it makes much more sense for us to set our goal at where we actually want to get to, like wherever we decide net zero is, because then you can plan how many trees you need to plant based on that number, and it makes the whole thing make sense. You know what I'm saying?
Okay. I guess in that way, what we would need to do, let's say if we're going to consider planting trees to offset, possibly we can create, so for right now we have an urban canopy layer. So essentially it was worked on previously where we're measuring how many trees are planted in town. Now that's a static number, I don't know what it is now. But if we were looking at defining an area for the scope, that would be something we could consider.
Yeah, I think if we like that, so broadly we're calling that carbon farming, and it can like there's in-town carbon farming and outside carbon farming. And like current tree canopy would be our zero. It would be our, it's our status. So like they call that the business as usual. So we won't actually get CO2 credit for the trees that we have at the moment that we planted. But that's why we need to complete that tree inventory and call that good, because from then on, every tree that we plant counts against our footprint.
Right.
Sean?
Yeah, so I guess, it seems the direction we're going here is scope 3. And I guess the question, like maybe against that, not that I'm against it for sure, but there's so many factors we can't control.
Right.
And we could do some incredibly good work here and never get to net zero because of all the factors of scope 3. We have no control over what happens when our citizens leave the borders. We have no control over how products that we consume in our community are produced and moved. So I guess we just introducing that to the discussion and the argument. As much as scope 3 would be the most comprehensive, is it really beyond our capacity to
That is the question.
impact?
That is the question.
Yeah, there's another one too. When we really get to, say, use the biochar technique to reduce waste, then we actually are having a larger number that offsets the CO2.
Yeah, I can't remember the slogan, I'm sorry, but what's the line? Perfection is the enemy of...
The good?
Thank you. In my experience looking at municipal plans, the main sources of GHGs are buildings, transportation, and in small town and rural areas, waste.
Yep.
I'm not saying we shouldn't know about these other areas, but if we want to get going, and we have to get going, we need to just be identifying those key major areas, and we need to be getting on with them. And so I would say, let's not take a lot of time on scope 3. Let's focus on scope 1 and 2 and just get going.
Okay. What does the committee think?
If I could just, sorry, push back on that. It's true that if you look at most municipalities' footprint, the issues you've listed are the bulk of it. That's because most of them haven't done what I'm proposing we do. If you look at the ones that did, there's 3 in Canada, all of them agreed that our food was actually the largest. It's about half of our carbon footprint, and it's ignored in scope 1. So and that's one where we actually also have the most control. We're in a rural area, there's a farming community all around us. There's a lot of things that we can do around our food supply, around carbon farming. There's the scope 3 is a much larger footprint, but it's also the reality of the situation. To go with a smaller number in hopes of getting to carbon neutral that way, I think would be folly, because we won't actually achieve carbon neutral. We'll just have been choosing to be blind to our carbon footprint, right?
We'll have opportunity to update this. There's lots of opportunity for that. And as more techniques come in, more knowledge comes in, all that sort of thing. But really, I don't want to be waiting to get going.
Should it be a phased approach?
Yes, it has to be.
Yeah.
By default, in terms of how many times we have to review, and I can't remember what that is right now. But is it every 5 years?
Yes.
Every,
So the reason why it's every 5 years is because by the 5th year, we'd have a mid-target reach. So we assess based on have we reached our goal, have we not, that kind of thing. So typically, if you keep track of the numbers every year, it's easier to keep track overall, because you can course correct. If you wait till the 5th year, you have to do larger corrections.
But am I correct that what we're talking about is milestone 1?
Yeah.
And in this phase, there isn't a, now go back and revisit milestone 1. Like everything else flows downstream from this. But we could conceivably decide to start over, but all of the targets that we're setting, everything that we're doing comes post this determination, right? It's not, the system doesn't anticipate us circling back and changing our minds in a couple of years, right?
See, once the climate action plan is written and we have sort of like have our targets and we have our goals, then we reassess our goals in monitoring and managing, which is step 4 and 5. So 5 is implementation. Essentially, once we have done everything and everyone has accepted the targets and the plan has been written, and then it's it's just repeating itself. So it is possible to come back to the drawing board after the climate action plan has been written, so long as we are aware that this is a new year and this is a new data set, but the goals will still stay the same. It'll just slightly change based on how much we've done in the previous year.
But just to be clear, the goals wouldn't stay the same. That's what I'm saying. If we decided to switch to scope 3, that would mean new goals, new everything, right?
Because there's new data, yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
we start out with the basics, and then we add as we go.
So like, I understand wanting to have a complete list to start with, but based on the nature of the process, I think there will always be something different. If there's more data available, more resources, like Sue was saying, then we'll have to reassess again when it comes time to reviewing the numbers. So.
Richard, could you just remind me what the time frame was for the completion of milestone 1? Like, just looking at scope 2 and scope 3, if we were to go with scope 3, how much more time would that take to include that data gathering
So,
and whatnot?
what I would like to see is that I wanted to have the transportation and the agricultural forestry and the land uses sector, as well as the IPPU, done before June, so that the milestone 1 would be completed, and then we sort of work on setting our targets and the survey, and then we can move on to milestone 2. If, let's say, we're looking at scope 3 and we're including things like the wetland, possibly food consumption, depending on how difficult it is to assess those areas, it may take a little longer. I don't know how long it would take. Maybe another month. It all depends on what's available. If, say, Nate's able to do the rough assessments and we have a placeholder number for, say, wetlands, it may not take that long. But it all depends, I guess, on what the research is saying.
So just to clarify, you're saying the scope one, you'll have all of that ready for the next meeting?
I hope to.
Okay, I can do the missing pieces. So by next meeting, if you have the data for scope one and I've successfully gotten everything in place for scope two, won't take any longer. If it's not ready by then, I'll stop pushing for it. But if it cannot slow us down at all and we just are working with the real number, I think it would be much better.
Okay.
Also, sorry, one more thing to just make the case for this. If we're trying to differentiate ourselves as a leader in the space, trying to create jobs and industry around it, trying to put ourselves on the short list of municipalities that are like sticking their neck out and going the extra mile is a good thing, and this will make us one of 4. So that's a positive list to be on. So yeah, that's all I wanted to say about it.
Okay.
If it doesn't take that much extra time, we'll see what it ends up with then.
Okay.
We're okay being bold and brave.
That's how we
So
roll.
is everybody okay with
Yes. So.
exploring scope 3, provided we can get it all together by the next meeting?
Yeah. So.
No pressure.
Give or take 3 or 4 weeks, we should be here again, and we'll have another discussion about the results.
Perfect.
Yeah. Okay. My report's done.
Okay. Thanks, Victor. Okay, so project updates, climate action plan, waste data.
Okay, so looking at the waste data, so how it works is that for the, what is it called? It's called the methane containment approach when you're looking at trying to assess how much greenhouse gas emissions comes from our solid waste. And so in 2021, we created 2,680 tons of solid waste. Now this being a baseline, I can't tell you if that's a lot or not, but that's just a number for 2021. And what happens is that it breaks it down for CO2 emissions and our methane emissions. So for CO2 emissions, we have 3,618 tons, and for C4 is 144.72. No, that isn't anywhere. This is a report.
Okay.
Typically, when the slideshow will be ready, it'll be easier to view it, but I'm just giving a verbal update, unfortunately. Yeah.
Sorry, just one question. Is that CO2e? Like, is it CO2 equivalent or CO2?
CO2 equivalent.
CO2 equivalent.
And those numbers are done by the milestone tool, so I didn't do the calculations. Essentially, I just put in the tonnage for how much waste we have, and that's the results we had. So typically in the waste sector, we're looking at solid waste and also wastewater. But because our facilities already process waste, it's counted in the corporate section. So that's why.
Did you include, I guess, detailed analysis on the waste that we have, the amount of organics in the waste, the amount of liquid in the waste?
There's a breakdown, yes, actually. So for food, let's say we're going to call it a percentage out of 100, just to make it easier. So for food, it was 23.3%.
Sorry, how much?
23.3%.
Okay.
For paper and cardboard, it's 9.9%. And for wood products, it's 11%. For diapers and pet waste, it's 6.1%. And for garden and plant debris, is 4.4%. And textile, meaning clothes, is 1.4%. And rubber and leather is 1.30%. That's just a bit of a breakdown.
Okay. So I guess, because the one question we will want to consider is how we're going to treat organic waste, and should we be coming up with either green bin programs or more compost, whatever we want to do. That'll be a whole other debate and discussion, I guess. When you look, that's basically 25% of our, over 25%, I guess, of what could be composted, which is represented in our volume and weight today.
I can tell you that in speaking with Vanessa, she works in public works. She's sort of our environmental technician or technologist. So she said that roughly 30% of our garbage is organic waste.
And that's what I wondered, those percentages that you were reading
Yep.
off, is that based on Smiths Falls?
Yes.
Okay.
They do account before they send it to JM to do the processing.
Great. That's great.
Yeah.
So yeah, and just certainly in that menu of options that I circulated, one of them was setting up a compost bin system using an insect called BSF. Have you guys ever heard of those? Is that ringing a bell? They're awesome, and in terms of a way of breaking down organic waste that doesn't release a bunch of nitrous oxide in the process, it's this insect that is incredibly efficient at just converting organic waste into insect protein. And if you then use that insect protein to either feed chicken or fish or something, you can produce an enormous amount of food out of compost waste in a way that doesn't create emissions. So there's there's a way to kind of have a triple win where we reduce the amount of waste we put out there, and we're creating food locally that takes out of the carbon footprint of our, from our food. So anyways, I explained in one of the things that's black soldier flies, but it's a great solution for compost that we should consider.
I will put a pin in that. So the thing is, it's easy for us to capture the waste and send it off because that's what's going to happen with the food waste. I don't think there is at this time a capacity to manage our waste. So even the waste that we collect now, it goes out of town. Same thing with the food waste. If we have, say, a contractor, it's going to be the same process. I don't know if there's a way that we can get involved in helping break down the waste in their own facility, but that's sort of what's going to happen.
Yeah, no, to do this, we would have to stand up a black soldier fly. It would be a building basically, but like if you picture for every 100 trucks of waste that goes there, 15 trucks of insect protein comes out. And like if you then say feed that to trout that we're stocking the river with, there's almost a 1-to-1 conversion of protein.
Fair.
So like that 10 truckloads of insects becomes 10 truckloads of trout. And so it can be a really cool way to produce food out of our waste.
Sorry, Richard, those numbers again, just to go back, those
Yes.
are residential,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
So it doesn't take into account the IC&I?
No.
Okay, because that, when we're looking at carbon, right, that's a whole part of it too. I don't really know what IC&I does with the waste here. I don't know where it gets shipped to, but that is something else we would need to be capturing, right?
I could review the numbers again, but the challenge is that that's for private collections. So like it's going to be knocking on everyone's door saying, how do you deal with your waste?
Yeah. But it's part of the community's waste
Yes.
stream and the organic waste.
So I guess that is one area that's missing. Go ahead.
But I would think we would have an opportunity to collect that information from the waste management companies that are doing the collection for the ICI.
Yes. I guess I could follow up and seeing like how they processed it. Because that is the one of, so that's a
Maybe
challenge.
tracking the weight, the volume.
Yeah, it's more on weight for us, but
Actually, they more than likely don't separate organic from inorganic. So that's a whole other wasted opportunity, frankly. So, anyway, Tony Hendricks in Perth knows about IC&I.
he's the guy I should contact?
He's retired now. He
Oh.
used to own the gig in Perth,
Oh.
but he explored this to the nth degree.
Not possible.
Sue can put you in touch.
I'm sorry?
You can put them in touch.
Yeah.
Sorry, Sue, what does IC&I stand for?
Oh, institutional, commercial, and,
Industrial.
yeah,
Oh.
industrial. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Or industrial, commercial, institutional.
Yes.
Sure, you want.
Okay, okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you for that. So yeah, I guess you're one step closer. So that's my update for the waste data. I'll definitely check and see if there's any information I can get on, say, the institutional, commercial, and residential, institutional, commercial, and industrial components. So looking at CPWG logo.
Oh, sorry, can I?
Oh, sorry.
Before we finish
Yes,
that,
go
just
ahead.
wondering, so recognizing we're not yet at the point of actions and recommendations. However, at the same time, I think if there's widespread consensus here or decision here that we should be looking at potential methods of diverting organics from landfill, should we start that process now? Should
Yes.
we be looking at the alternatives? Because it may take us a year to develop a plan. So I guess is there capacity to do that? Is there, I think there's expertise probably here within the committee and staff to do that, rather than waiting until we're at the point where, well, now that, okay, we've got all our plan in place, now we're going to start recommendations.
That's a good point. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, so as CNL, we've been tracking a number of developments in the area around organics. And
Climate Network Liner.
sorry, yes. Apologies. And we keep looking at trying to bring together all of the lower tier municipalities in Lanark County and Smith Falls in order to talk collectively about what could be done. Because it is ridiculous that everybody's doing the organics on their own. And so we don't have anything planned for that, but I mean, I can just briefly review some of the stuff that is underway. So very quickly, there's a private program in Mississippi Mills, run by a private guy who's doing residential collection, $5 a bucket, $5 a week.
Oh, wow.
He's
Is it voluntary driven? Sorry.
no, I mean, it's a revenue generator, $5, right?
Oh, okay.
And so that's done very well. He was expanding into Carlton Place. He takes the organic stuff in Mississippi Mills to a farm. And that Mississippi Mills, as a municipal authority, is in agreement with, okay?
Oh,
He was expanding into Carlton Place. Carlton Place was very excited about this, but has now put a stop on it because they're not comfortable with not having the C of A for the management of organic waste. Okay? Perth is the only one in the region with the C of A for the management of organic waste.
Yeah.
Perth collects it in a green bin. The staff there very much want to sell the organic material or provide it to people, but they can't because some years ago they found a shark in it.
Oh,
And the council doesn't want to hold the liability
yeah.
for making that
Available.
available to the public. So there are more issues here than the technology. And this is part of what we want to do with CNL, is bring people together to try and figure out how we can do this collectively here. There isn't one answer, we know that. There are numerous answers.
Yes.
And what I would just add to what you were saying about, like, should we make a plan or explore the compost thing, is I think the second milestone is when we do the public survey, or where we reach out to the public. And what I've been suggesting is that when we do that, we present a menu of options so that we're engaging with them and we get some actionable feedback. And I think, like, in that initial draft that I circulated, it was one example of that, but it would be great to add several more and get public feedback about, like, any viable option should be considered. And if we can do that in a really public way that everyone can see, I think there's less, you know what I'm saying? I think it would be.
So I
That's
saw the
controversial.
survey. I hadn't commented yet properly, but so for things like, say, the carbon char, is that what we're calling it? What is it?
Biochar.
Biochar. So with the survey, I feel like it should focus more on what people have a capacity to change. So unless they're going to be individually participating in, like, say, the biochar program, I don't know what benefit would be to ask them for their input. See what I mean?
So just to be clear, what you're describing, what I think I hear you describing is a focus on individual accountability and responsibility and what can an individual do. And I would say that list that I provided is precisely the opposite. It's government actions that can happen, like programs that the government can stand up that will result in shrinking your carbon footprint. Because all of the leading scientists on the subject that I know now speak strongly against the notion that we should just be encouraging everybody to try to mitigate their carbon footprint. It really doesn't work. Like, when you're actually counting what it takes to get to zero, it's almost all government action. So
And I think we have
that's
to-
why, yeah.
And then I think we have to address our focus then on the corporate side, in the sense that if we're looking at having those initiatives led by the town, then I think the town should have a greater input in terms of, like, how that looks.
100%. Like, in the last meeting, I suggested that we run it by council because
Yeah,
these
I
are a
think
bunch
so.
of important public policy decisions that are up to the council to approve or not approve, and those decisions are going to be made in response to how we've rallied the town's support or failed to, right?
Yeah, I think there needs to be some sort of council buy-in before the survey becomes public. Otherwise, anything we recommend may not be something we're actually doing.
I agree, yeah.
Okay.
Do you want to say something?
Well, just like on my notes for the roundtable was just talking about the next update to council, or and how that'll be really the first report. And I thought we had that in our work plan
It is.
in the not too distant future. So shaping that message
Yes.
and talking about the opportunities and the risks and the cost, as much as we know, but getting it in front of them sooner rather than later is because then it's public. Then you've started the public
Conversation, yes.
But being very strategic about what that what that message is and how to engage them is.
So would you also want to like discuss this in more detail at the next meeting in terms of like what the contents of the survey would look like in addition to hopefully when all the as well as all the data that's being completed? So we can discuss kind of the content of the survey, that's so that when we bring it to council, we kind of agree that these are what we want council to consider.
I don't want council to have to approve our survey,
Oh,
but we don't want to get them involved in
okay.
creating this.
Then how do we have the conversation then?
Well, that's what I mean. I thought we had that. I thought there was an update coming like in our work plan. I can't remember. Was it the fall or was it in June?
It would be the fall, because
Was
we're
it
talking
fall?
about having it ready before budget.
Okay.
So it would be essentially a budget ask. But I'm just trying to understand how that ask actually will happen. So I don't know if it's I don't know how we do it really. We just have a little report saying we're asking for these sort of things. Like I need to.
It was less about asking and more about either it's an interim one before September, just to flag some of these ideas that we're directing, and it's more around the communication of it.
So do a report for information about the communication of these ideas.
No, I just want to flag some of this conversation at a high level and saying there's opportunities and costs that come with these.
Okay.
And stay tuned because this fall, and if it's premature, then we shouldn't do it. But it's about how you craft that message that we're hard at it.
Mm-hmm.
This is going ahead. This is bigger than what, and more important than ever.
Okay.
And here's our next steps. But just somehow,
Sean?
No, it's okay.
Oh, sorry.
yeah.
Sorry, and just a point of clarity, we talked about circling back to council when we have like budget requests for the next year and making
Yeah.
a plan
That's
for what
exactly
that's
it.
going to look like.
Yeah.
I think what we're also talking about is this menu of options, and we've got 10 so far, but hopefully we'll get more, and circulating that and making sure that we're not proposing something that is out of whack with what council would want. And I think in the last meeting we talked about the example of a public transit system, and the feedback I got, I think from Sean, was that one there probably would be some appetite for, so that's number one on that list of options. But I would say, like, if we can add some more to that list of options, so it's a pretty extensive list, it's a menu of options. We could run that by council before we circulate it around, and like, it's designed to get their feedback. If they say they don't like certain ones and they all don't like it, we remove it from the survey and then distribute it, right? But like,
For example, we just last night approved a future feasibility. What's the future of this second arena we have? Big carbon producer, ice rink, hard to heat the old barn. But I would bet that in the scope there's very little attention. So we've hired a consulting group to look, and so they're going to come back next week. We want to make sure that their view is not just about how many hockey players are going to use the rink.
Right.
It's bigger than that. And I'm hoping when we think about it, so those are the kind of things I want to get in council's head. And the other one coming up was the backyard chickens. Is that a good thing for our carbon footprint, or is it a bad thing?
I almost added it to the list.
No, these are the things that are happening in real time
Yeah.
that I want, so somehow to get in front of them and to say, everything you're doing now, keep this in mind.
Okay.
So that,
Can I just add, and it's premature, but and I will get into it later, but this Saturday at our Electrified Land Art Forum, we are bringing in Compass, who are building the battery storage facility in Mississippi Mills. Can they actually address the issue of using the new Smith Falls water tank for electricity storage? I don't know. What I know is that they're looking for opportunities. They have a 22-year business plan. So this is something that municipalities should be looking to perform, quite frankly. There's that. In June 20th, we're holding a workshop here in Smith Falls on hot water heating systems. We can use that as an introduction to inform council
Right.
better about
And-
what's going on.
And the public, yeah.
Yeah, for sure. But, you know, to bring it to council's attention in particular, right?
Just an interim update on what
Yeah.
is going on and how their decisions right now can have an impact, not waiting for our final report or.
Okay.
Just circling back to the chickens for 1 second, because I know that's front of mind
Yeah.
right now. And yeah, I know.
I'd love to hear from the committee on that.
That's what I was wondering. Like, obviously, what we're supposed to do is a longer term thing, but is there a spot for us to weigh in on this, just the climate, like a climate lens analysis of that?
I think
Like,
there should be, but
I would-
like the whole everything we're talking about with how do we separate our organic waste and put it into something that reduces the demand on the food supply? I mean, chickens is that, and all you have to do is legalize that, and you not for everybody, but for everybody that wants to feed their compost to a chicken, you just did it. Like, yeah. So to me, it's like a no-brainer. We should do that. I don't know how everyone else feels, but
It's one of multiple answers. Yeah.
But it's a real situation that council's
Yes, to
ready to
consider.
address.
Mhm.
So the more committees that speak to it, or if you give us advice, but even if we don't ask for it, I just wanted to make sure that we, if it's backyard chickens, is there a contributing factor to greenhouse gas with them? Is there, what's the other side? You know, there's,
Very nice.
and do they weigh out equal, or is it better when, I don't know.
So we don't know when that's coming back. We suspect it'll be back probably in the next month or so. The whole question of the backyard chickens.
Yeah.
So we don't really, ideally, maybe put this in the next agenda
Yeah.
for a resolution either for or against, depends on what the overall sentiment is. And if someone has some time to, one, draft a resolution, but two, consider the carbon positive, negative impact of having backyard chickens
Okay.
in preparation for that. So I don't think it'll be too late. I don't think it's going to be on the agenda in the next couple of weeks, but
Yeah, no.
it could be.
So are you saying that you'd like a resolution on, say, backyard chickens in Smith Falls? This is for everybody to answer.
Yeah.
Yes or no? Yes.
Do we want to
Yes or
basically
no?
add our voice as a committee for or against backyard chickens?
I think we should.
As long as they're contributing to the reduction or mitigating the impact of carbon. If they're not, then no.
Can we just quickly dive down the deep rabbit hole on the chemistry of that part? I try, because I'm pro chicken and I was already doing this modeling, I already did that. I tried to do it anyways, but there's an X factor that's really challenging, and it's the same thing we had when they legalized cannabis. It's that everyone's kind of already doing it. They just want to be able to admit that they're doing it, and so it's like a lot of people in Smith Falls already have chickens. They just don't post photos of them on Facebook because it's not allowed. And
So they have illegal chickens.
yeah, so they like really people want to come out of the chicken closet. I'm not sure that there's going to be that big a climate change impact because it's already happening. But in terms of just the science of it, leaving any kind of heavy, high nitrogen organic waste, all your compost, just leaving it to compost in an area. We think of that as organic horticulture, and it is. That's like what sustainable agriculture is. But it does also put out amazing amounts of nitrous oxide. And nitrous oxide is one of the most potent greenhouse gas things. So just leaving compost in place is actually is not that great, honestly. Like what you want to do is run it through an organism that doesn't have a huge greenhouse gas emission of itself. And that, like, black soldier flies are great for that. Chickens are also great for that. What you don't want is something that grazes, that has like methane bacteria living in its gut. Cows, goats, all of those things, those are all trouble. But birds are great, rabbits are great, just anything with a quick digestive tract. But yeah, so it's really hard to do any kind of specific modeling and say like our carbon footprint will shrink by this because we don't know how many people will get chickens. We don't know how many people already have chickens. But writ large, it's definitely a net good, and you're reducing demand on the food supply. And every time you eat an egg instead of a hamburger, you've radically shrunk your carbon footprint. Like beef is one of the biggest contributors to our carbon footprint.
Yep.
And just about any food choice that we can provide people to help them switch from beef to something else we'll cut your footprint just about in half. It's like, so
Interesting.
chicken good.
Right.
Where does skunks fit in that equation?
What's that?
Where does skunks fit in?
I don't know, man. I do have
If I was trapping them, I move them somewhere else into my compost bin every day, but now just figure they're gonna compost it for me. So
Ah, they might work.
Yeah.
Peter.
Yeah, the thing here is if the bylaw is passed, some suggestions that are going to minimize those footprints. That is important because if you pass this knowledge and so on, more people will start doing it. Second thing I like to propose is, example, wetland and methane emission. So those may not have been looked at before and hence not much data available.
Right.
But these things will be coming up because they are about to be taking a lot more prominence of importance. So maybe in all our studies, we should have footnotes saying that we're always on the lookout for new data. Right. So what we have there is not cast in stone. If there's something better, we move on to that.
Okay.
Sue?
Just a question, when does the arena, second arena come up?
It's starting, we've just awarded the tender for the feasibility of what's the future use of it, if any.
Okay.
So it'll be over the next few months, we're doing the work.
Why this fall we'll have the report, I think.
Yeah.
Sorry?
Why this fall? Sometimes fall we'll have the report, I think, before you
Okay,
grant.
and so is the contractor then looking at the carbon?
I don't know this, I'd have to go back and look to see the RFP that went out, whether that was included. If it isn't, I want it included.
So we can check with, yeah, because we weren't involved in draft, council wasn't involved in drafting the RFP, so we can find out.
So this is where, you know, we should be incorporating the climate lens ASAP, right?
Absolutely.
And
I suspect it's in there, but I don't know.
Okay.
So we've asked for more detail. We already did last night. We
See,
said
I'll
we
see
need
what
more
next.
scope.
Yeah,
So I gotta get down
on
to
that
some
note, I
else.
think, was the planning department gonna just pilot the climate lens on something, or?
Yes. So we haven't forgotten that. That's still something that we're looking to incorporate. It just in terms of everything else that we're doing, we kind of deprioritized it because it wasn't going to be immediately used by us at this time. But we're still looking at developing the climate lens tool.
but it can be being implemented in other departments.
It can be. I'm not sure that it is.
So how do we as a committee make that happen?
How do we make them use the climate lens tool?
Yes.
So I think first that the management team has to decide that it's something worthwhile to do. So what we were going to do was essentially like do the research and present it as a business case option for them to consider to do. And then the management team would say whether or not adopting the climate lens tool would help with their process and thinking for any sort of project that they're doing or not. So if management says yes, then we move forward and we sort of work on the policy and creation of the climate lens tool. But right now we're in the research phase in terms of figuring out whether or not it's applicable. So the research will be looking at how the municipality can use a climate lens tool, depending on the department. Possibly, like say, we could update the procurement bylaw, or we could, include it as a reporting feature on, say, municipal reports, things like that. But right now, we weren't really sure how it would fit within the Smith Falls context, as I call it.
Okay, so how do we move this along so that we make it?
So that's why I was thinking about this, not an update report, but council needs to be saying, we want you to use this.
Yes.
Council will direct staff to use it or start using it somewhere. We want it in use tomorrow. Let's go. And then there's a couple other things we could add in, just an interim communication with them, saying, and say, this is an ask from this committee. We're requesting that council. We're requesting that council. Yeah.
Can we not, as a committee then, recommend this to council,
Yes.
that you do that, and that you, all departments start to build that in, right? In any reporting to council, because normally your reports to council include the economic analysis,
Yep.
right? They can also include then the
Strategic plan.
Yep.
the carbon analysis,
Yep.
basically.
Yep.
And use that as your test.
Yeah.
Right?
So
So instead of waiting, waiting for you guys to figure something out, let's just go straight and actually actually have the department starting to test it by using it right now.
I think that's a great idea. I love that. What I would add is that our group can offer to be of assistance just generally when we suggest that they use it. It can be a confuse, for people that aren't into the math and chemistry of it, it can be real confusing. So they can, you know what I mean? Like they can loop us in and we can just phrase it in terms of we're offering our assistance on climate lens. So.
Bob Arnke would happily come in and train more people. He tried to do that.
He did.
Hardly anybody
Yeah.
turned up. But I know that he would happily come in and do that again. So, can we move this forward?
Question for you, Peter.
Yeah.
Do you feel the council will need, before we come just with here's the climate lens that we want you to adopt, do they need all that background on what this group has been doing and where we're moving? Or do you think we could go with them just with that tool?
That's sort of what I don't know. I don't
Okay.
know.
Some council members, Sean and I are raising it all the time, like, what's the impact? But, it's not a policy, and if we're not there, it may not get asked. So that's why I think council's ready for especially if you bring some topical issues, like we see you're doing the arena review. Make sure you look at, I see you're looking at backyard chickens. Consider the pros, advantages of that. Here's some other things we're up to. And in the fall, you'll get a robust update. But right now, we're working. We've got some things we want you to consider or want you to implement right now. This isn't rocket science. We can walk and chew gum at the same time.
Yes.
And I just think they're ready to get reminded.
So
Four of us are watching it really closely, and the others are busy with other things. So it's just
So would this be a report to request that it be used by council? Like, how would we structure this?
well, one, is there an appetite to get a communique in front of them, and this is information and this is a request. These two things we're asking for you to support or give direction to staff to start using it. Get trained and start using it, even if it's phased in. I don't care. Start with one department, but once council says it, management will do it. It's not going to happen tomorrow, but why are we waiting?
So what would you want to see from me? Would you want to see a report to council requesting that the climate lens be investigated further? No.
Be utilized.
Utilized. Sorry.
No more investigation. We don't have time.
Yeah, Echo Perth, the model of it's in using.
I know.
We see it all the time in Leonard County.
It's in Tay Valley, for
It's
example.
already there.
I know. Okay.
Peter?
My suggestion is, when you make presentation to council about the climate lens, have a little exercise so they actually going through that and use the data. Then in terms of the other departments, you supply them with the information, have them fill in the first one, then you follow up by a workshop that addresses their questions. Then it will be at least they will see that a lot more differently than working alone.
Right.
Well, it's nice there's supports and training to help support the implementation.
So it's a request to use the climate lens, and then you offer a possibility of having some sort of workshop to help people who don't understand.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Well, I was thinking of a little bit broader communique, but
Yeah.
in
no,
10 minutes,
okay.
let's just say you've got 10 minutes to present 5 slides.
Yeah.
One on this, here's some other things we're doing, and throw some data in about our what we're emitting, and some next steps of what the group's up to. I just didn't want to wait till the fall.
I hear you.
So just and then Sean and I'll get all excited and expand on it.
So it's an
And
interim
Chris
report
McGraw will
update on
jump
what.
in.
So it's an interim report update on what the climate, what this committee wants to see happen, and also what we're working on.
Some opportunities right now.
Okay. So upcoming and also future stuff. I like that. And we include the climate lens as something that we want to see happen, along with everything else that we're suggesting for the climate action plan.
Yeah, you don't need to give everything.
Okay.
Just some.
Some highlights.
Yeah.
And I'm jumping in here and just thinking, okay, part of it is they want to know what this committee has been doing
Right.
for months,
Yeah.
right? And we have been quiet.
And sorry, but there are things happening in real time
Yes,
that aren't coming through from a climate lens, like the arena.
yeah.
what's its future? Well, that's a huge impact. We need to be thinking, so that's all. That they're making decisions without a climate lens or without this committee's input. And I want to raise that right now.
Great.
Okay.
What would you recommend, sorry, who should actually present to council? And should we meet with Malcolm in advance? What do you
The
suggest?
process, well, just putting, I said, 5 slides, 10 minutes, like really high level. And, but very specific, we're asking council support to adopt the climate lens, to start phasing it in as right now.
Yeah.
And then council would say, yes, staff, we want this to happen, and then it goes ahead. So if there's some asks, put them in that way. Sean, I would give Malcolm a heads up. We're putting together interim report or interim communique.
Right.
There'll be a more formal one in the fall, but
This is just for now.
this is just, we see there's,
Yeah.
Yeah.
the other committees are doing that. Their processes aren't as formalized as this with the state scope 1, scope 2. They're just doing work.
Right.
So they come as need be and ask for direction or give direction,
Right.
solicited or not.
Right.
So would the committee want to see this report before it goes to council?
Yeah.
Yeah. I
Okay.
think that would be good. And we could touch on then, what we're deciding on the scope
Yeah.
1, 2, and 3, although is that getting too complicated?
Not necessarily, because if we're on track and we finish everything by the end of June, by the time you guys see it, there'll be an update on the scope work that's been completed, as well as the communique that will be going towards council. So there'll be 2 things, the update on the scope work and the communique that you guys will be reviewing for comments.
And the statement that we're going to be doing.
The resolution,
public
yes,
Consultation.
yes.
I didn't mean to get us off the agenda, but
No, I think it's blending well into the logo discussion.
Yes, it
because
is.
we're talking about communication and
Yep.
what this group is doing. I think the logo is a part of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe
Oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
you go ahead.
Okay, so sorry, just putting one foot in front of each other, I'm starting to understand how this might play out. So if we do this presentation to council, we can describe the issue that we're wrestling with scope 1, scope 2, scope 3. By then we'll also have calculated a carbon footprint. Like we won't have officially declared
Yes.
milestone 1 done,
Yes.
but the work will be done.
Yes.
And that's a significant accomplishment, and B, that's a big part of what we would be talking about in terms of a climate lens. That's the footprint of the town. And I think that might be presenting that to council as both an accomplishment, it's a way of formalizing, showing it to the town, and included in there is the carbon footprint of the stadium. It kind of touches on those issues. And in that presentation, we can also say, we would strongly encourage you to start using climate lens for every public policy choice you make, and you're welcome to use our team to help craft any kind of opinions on that.
I would suggest too, giving them a heads up that, because at milestone 2
Yes.
is when we set the reduction.
That's
target,
right. That's right.
And that has to be approved by council.
Yes, of course. It has to.
So inherent then in the presentation should be that we will be going to council.
Some next steps.
Yes.
To ask for
Yeah,
that.
so in the fall, you'll see a formal update, and in there we'll go into more detail, but these are things it's your job to do this. Okay.
Okay. Like that.
But, yeah,
Just before we move on, I know Sue, getting back to your original question, who is going to be doing this presentation? So
Yeah.
maybe we can just confirm that, that would be you, Richard, doing that, and would you like people in
the
the
chair of the committee is usually part of that. You don't have to deliver it, but you need to be standing there. But you just need to stand there beside it, because it's not a staff, it's this committee that is the power.
Yes.
Yeah, that by the time the
just
communique
need to
goes to
stand.
council, by the time the communique goes to council, we would have already discussed it here. So you're being part of the presentation, you would have already seen what's going on, and the committee would have addressed what was missing, and it would have been done.
Late June,
Yeah.
if we have one more meeting, we start working on this communique, there's all those numbers, and the committee would be, everybody to hear would be better, just sitting, it takes 10 minutes. and then you can leave.
Yeah, okay.
You don't stay for
I'm
the whole
happy to
thing.
do that, but if we get into chicken and methane, I will just defer to the experts in the.
Fair enough, fair enough. That is if council has other questions that we can't answer.
Right, yeah.
And it would be, we're not saying do backyard chickens or not, just that
Yeah.
our research says that there are benefit to reducing carbon as opposed, so just from that point of view, let alone, and a protein substitute to beef. Just saying that's enough. You're not there to,
Give
it's
them all
not the chicken more. Yeah.
I would just add from experience, when you start to talk about substituting for beef, and you get into
Well,
Politics, yeah, I know.
major
Yeah.
disputes.
just an excellent source of protein close to home, without
Good
saying.
Nice, yeah.
Okay, so we're moving on to the logo.
Yes. Just an update. So I spoke with communications and our economic development manager, Julia, and she says that for every time there's going to be a sort of social media post from the committee, we would be included in that communication, but we won't have a logo. So logos are not typical for committees. I know some committees do have it, but they're sort of phasing that process out. So for us, we're not eligible to get a logo, essentially.
Trying to brand the town logo.
Yeah, it kind of competes. So we would be acknowledged in the communication, but we won't have our own logo. Yeah.
And I know at one point there was talk about a website or
Yes.
a web page.
Yes.
So,
That's in creation. Yeah,
Okay.
that's still going. That's still a
Okay.
thing. Yeah, that won't take any time at all.
okay,
So before, so when M1 is finished and we're starting M2, the website will be already up so that people can already see the project page. Yeah.
okay, and grant monitoring.
Yes. So that's just an update saying that there's no further updates. Essentially, no grants are available at this time that pertains to the committee. Yeah.
Okay,
Yes.
all right.
Do we have any other grants?
Nothing in the new FCM, PCP.
Nothing that we can use right now. Yeah. No. Nothing that we can use. Nothing that would be pertaining to us. So, for example, FCM, they have a, what do they call it? So there is a,
Green Municipal Fund?
hmm?
The Green Municipal Fund?
Yes, so they have a energy retrofitting program. Essentially, they're trying to encourage municipalities to have a retrofitting program. But to be approved, we also need a climate action plan first. So that's why we didn't bring it up, because we're not at that stage to capitalize on the funds, because they need a climate action plan first to know that we're serious before they give us any funding to do that. Now, Lanark County does have a climate action plan, and they're building their retrofitting program. So the only way we could benefit is if we piggyback on their own program and promote it through them.
Just address that, Richard. So they have an application in, it's huge. It is intended to go to 2040. And we're, as CNL with our Neighborhood Climate Concierge project, we're a part of that
Good.
proposal. Lanark County is hopeful that they're going to get it. We actually, as CNL, we just met with
Clean air?
a person who works for the Green Municipal Fund.
Okay.
And she was explaining that that particular competition is really competitive, lots of municipalities have applied.
So there's a lot of uptake.
Well, a lot of interest, so it doesn't mean everybody's gonna get it.
Right.
Right. Now, I know Lanark County is optimistic because they were early in on it.
Yep.
Because we brought a particular person to Lanark County.
Okay.
But aside from that too, with our Neighborhood Climate Concierge project, and basically knitting together all of that, we're able to do that in Smith Falls.
Right, that makes sense. So you'd be, I guess, the NGO helping out Smith Falls in terms of providing that service.
Yeah.
Good. I guess when it comes down to the creating the plan, that would be, I guess, a resource we could include. When it comes to creating the plan, the action plan, we can say that's a resource that we have. Lanark Climate, what is it? What's the
Climate Network Learner.
Climate Network Lantern? Okay. Yeah. So
Syllables.
yes. So that's all I have in terms of monitoring and updates.
Okay, thank you, Richard. You can have a break now. Okay, so we'll move on to roundtable updates, and maybe we'll start down here. Do you have anything, Dr. Marie, or Toby? Do you have any? Just happy to be here.
Yeah.
Okay, Peter?
Yeah, okay, a couple of things. Mention about Pedal Fest, and has been a request early in February that this committee should participate because it's a local event and it's a lot of climate change related. Same thing goes for CNL, yeah, right. Among that one there, I'm just thinking of, when we're talking about the carbon lands, that may be a good one to engage the community. Example, we talk about food. So let's get a menu. Okay, and have
Menu
this
of
climate
what?
lands thing, how much is carbon dioxide value and so on. And also the nutritional value of each of those meals and the price. Then have the audience know if they want to fill it out and so on, then put it into a draw. And that draw actually will give you a price if you're all correct, right? And then basically the price is, we give you the value, we give you a sample of a meal that has got the lowest carbon footprint,
Interesting.
the most economic ones, and either get the high school hospitality group to do an assembly of that one there, or another restaurant.
Interesting.
So that way we are really tying in hands-on thing, and what really does carbon footprint mean?
Interesting. So a carbon footprint food menu, basically.
Yeah, so that's one suggestion. So this is engaging, okay? The other one is, RIU belongs to a national organization called the Green Communities of Canada. And they have, is it 26 organizations? Or it may have grown, yeah. You started that.
I have it.
Yeah, right. And now RIU is recognized as the communities that earn the award for collaboration, marketing, all sorts of things. And it is the highlighted organization for the
Wow.
whole of GCC. So there's something to be congratulated, pretty much like the water treatment plant. Okay, so those two, yeah.
Thank you,
Two quick things. I spoke with the principal of my son's school just unofficially. I just asked her, I told her about the work that we're doing and asked if there was any kind of appetite within the school for assisting us in the ongoing monitoring. I was specifically thinking in terms of a way of actually showing that we're shrinking our carbon footprint with food. Public schools is a lovely way to do that because it's a cross section of the town, and you can make like a youth assignment around quantifying what that each household is eating and whatnot. Anyways, I just kind of bounced that off her, and she was super into it. And I didn't realize all the stuff they're doing for climate change, but they are leaning into it. They've got compost bins in all the classrooms. They're taking it very seriously, and it really got me thinking that the school board specifically could be like a force multiplier in what we're trying to do. And I don't know what will come of it, but what I would like to ask of this board is to have everyone's permission to have Peter and I do a follow-up meeting with the board to just kind of feel out where there's an appetite for collaboration and whatnot. But yeah, I think there's a lot of potential to join forces with the school board in reducing our carbon footprint. I'm not sure about the rules around that, if we need to hold a vote or to officially give us permission to go talk to them, or if that's just, how does that work?
Not quite sure. Usually there's some sort of consensus for a project, so I think the committee would have to decide if it's something worthwhile they want to investigate.
it was agreed.
Yeah.
You know,
Is that
that's what
okay?
the minutes would,
Yeah.
it was
Yeah.
agreed that Nate would follow up. Now, there's more than one school board. There's the
Oh, so
separate
that's
board.
my
and the
question.
public
Yeah,
board.
in fact, we were thinking of the first board that we approached would be Upper Canada District School Board at
Okay.
the director level. Okay.
And if you, I think it's a great idea, also to get the copy of their plan, right? Jamie Schoolers, our local school board elected trustee,
Okay.
born and raised Smith Falls, so, and he'd be a good,
Yeah, he used to be the chair of the board.
I don't know about that, but he's still on the
Yeah.
board.
Yeah,
He's
he-
still on the
yeah.
school
Mhm.
board, and a good
Yeah.
local advocate. so.
The director was a former student.
Mm.
And, you know, in science fair, we've been conversing about, you know, that sort of dialogue.
Okay, wonderful. So sorry, my one other thing, I'm trying to model out, do models of what our carbon footprint will be moving forward, and there's no perfect way to do that because the future's unwritten. But a lot of it's relatively straightforward. The hardest X factor that I'm wrestling with is the level of adoption of electric vehicles that we anticipate.
Oh,
And,
wow.
and there's no right or wrong answer. This is just our like gut instinct ballpark guess. But rather than it just being my gut instinct ballpark guess, what I was hoping is just at this meeting I could just poll everyone. Like, what's your best? I've got 3 questions. It's 5 years from now, 10 years, or sorry, 4 questions. 5 years from now, 10 years from now, 15 years from now, and 20 years from now. What do you think is your best guess on? Like, let's start with 5 years from now. What percentage of cars in Smith Falls do you think are going to be e-vehicles in 5 years? My sense is not very many. That we'll eventually get to some nice adoption, but in the next 5 years, my best guess is less than 5% of cars are going to be e-vehicles. What do you guys think?
I'd encourage you to come out to our forum on Saturday and hear Steve Lapp.
Okay.
He has been exploring this in particular for many years.
Nice. But
And so
what do you think? What would you put the number on for 5 years
I have
out?
an EV. Given the absolutely critical status that we are in with the climate crisis, and given the current federal government, I think we'll move very quickly. If we elect the wrong next government, we will backtrack.
So agreed, we don't know what the government's going to be, but I need to put a number on it so I can do this modeling. So for 5 years out, I was going to put it at 5%. Does anyone object to that number?
Come and listen to Steve. You'll
All right.
get a far better.
What about 10 years out? Do you guys have an opinion on that?
Interesting, out of this group here, we have 2 electric
More
vehicles.
than that, yeah. And Sean does.
Yeah.
I have,
Right, 3 there, yeah.
But it's also an equity thing, right? Like, I'm
Yeah.
fortunate enough that I can
The,
afford to buy.
along that line there, part of the thing here besides the electrical supply is the price,
Yep.
affordability.
well, and
Now-
sorry, but BYD, you know, the Chinese company that Warren Buffett has invested in, right? Just came out with the Eagle the other day.
Is that a new vehicle?
EV, $30,000 max, okay? And it's blocked out of North America at the moment, but they're gonna be selling them everywhere. So, you know, if
Not in North America, that's the
well,
problem.
It is very interesting to
Yeah.
see what might happen that way.
I think in about 10 or 15 years, we're going to hit a point where it's much cheaper to have an electric vehicle. Like the gas is
so.
already cheaper. We might get there in 5 years. I think we'll almost certainly be there in 10 years. And by 15 years, that should have fuddled down to so 20 years out, I'm guessing about half the cars will be e-vehicles. I would does somebody think it would be 75% or 100%, or is there any kind of,
You know, the federal target at the moment is no sales of ICE vehicles past 2035. So that says it, right? And the turnover every year, I think is, I got this right, if I'm remembering correctly, is 15%. So you can calculate it based on that.
and so by those numbers, if just new vehicles, that they stop selling new gas vehicles in 10 years, looking at the number of cars in Smith Falls that aren't brand new,
that's kind of how I get to about 50% 20 years out. So like maybe I honestly I don't like you said the choice of government could radically affect this, but in terms of us trying to do a model where if we want to get to net zero, there's a certain amount of trees that we need to plant each year, and the what's going to determine how many trees is our best guess on 20 years from now. How much pollution are we emitting? And almost everything else is pretty knowable. Or at least pretty modelable. The carbon thing, it's kind of our best guess. So, yeah.
The worry I have here is the States is the number one oil producer in the world now. And that and knowing how the government is run is basically controlled by the lobbies. And like Biden's already said, well, no Chinese electric vehicles, but then how much are being produced in the States?
Yeah.
The lowest price is not $30,000, it's $18,000 you can get an electric vehicle in China. And if that price is brought into Canada, we can change things overnight, right? But already the stop is there. And when we have a change of government, EV is not going to go ahead. That's the problem.
Interesting.
In fact, if we make it a common goal for all nations to work together against this enemy, common enemy, climate change, if we work together against it, rather than splitting all those politics and so on, we'll be going much further. That's unfortunate. Yeah.
Did you get your answer, Nate?
Oh yeah. It's all good.
Toby?
If I could add something for the electric cars, wouldn't it be better to just do a complete lowball estimate for the amount of electric vehicles? Like if we overplant, that would be better than if we underplant.
A hundo, yes.
If you can't get an accurate model, would that just not be the best
Yeah,
idea?
and that's basically with yes, you're 100%, and basically with everything we do, that's how we're doing it. We're doing a best guess, but with room, we're trying to leave a little bit of margin there. And for other things, like for our electrical grid, for the other things, I can kind of take a swing at it. This one has really been stumping me because honestly, like a lowball guess, I couldn't tell you whether 50% adoption in 20 years is a super lowball guess or way extravagantly too high. I don't know what your guys' gut instinct is on that, but it's hard for me to say.
Well, come here, Steve. He's been doing this for years, so
You'll know more?
he knows.
You should join Saturdays.
And does the town have any electric vehicle charging stations at the moment?
Yes, we do. Every
Just that
few.
one, right?
But
No, we have
They
more than one.
don't
They're not open to the
have-
public.
That's the problem. And also, it's like,
They're for the town vehicles.
and you don't have any fast chargers.
that's what I was going to say. The technology here is kind of slow, so the uptake is slower.
We're lousy at that.
There was looking into a grant, though, but depends on federal grants, and it's a
It's
complicated
cheap.
process.
We got cheap.
Yeah.
There's a brand new one right in front of Pet Value.
Yeah. That was part of the site plan.
It's a
Yes.
slow charger?
Yes.
It's a slow?
Too.
Okay.
So normally with new site plan applications for, say, industrial and commercial areas, whenever they're configuring their parking lot, we say that we need EV chargers as well.
Good stuff.
The
Yeah.
unfortunate thing too, even about electric charging, is depending on, for example, Tesla won't be able to charge in the regular one.
Oh, really?
And yeah,
So it's not a universal
There's
thing?
two different
so you
ones.
have to go to the Tesla's charging station.
Oh.
Yeah.
The proprietary one is getting phased out into the Tesla one's going to become the standard.
Oh,
But
okay.
there's still two operating. And the legacy EVs will have to use the old ones. We're going to have two for a while.
Oh.
But was that? I guess that's not like a thing in the zoning where it's like which one we have to put in there.
We never specify, really.
Okay.
But it's important that you guys know this, because dear Elon just fired his whole charging team of 500 people. And so the whole further rollout of the Tesla network is uncertain at this point. It's a bit crazy. Yeah.
But Tesla is good in the sense, if they have a certain charging station that's crowded, you get a message, go to some other places. So that communication is bad, good, yeah.
And all of the EV companies are transitioning to the Tesla system, so that in a year I'll be able to use Tesla,
Yeah.
even though I have a Hyundai.
With adapters.
Yeah, they're sending an adapter. It's in the mail, apparently.
Oh, wow. This is news to me.
But Smith Falls doesn't have a Tesla bank either, of chargers, so anyway.
Okay. Peter?
No, I already spewed my, I did, yeah. Chickens and youth arena.
In that order? I hope not. Okay. Okay. Oh dear.
Go ahead, Sue.
Okay, so I've not mentioned it 1, 2, 3, 4 times already today, but anyway, please, I'd invite you all, come to our Electrify Lanark Forum on Saturday. We do ask that you register. It is only $20 and it's basically for lunch. It's provided by Gather. Now, why should you come? Why? Okay, so what it is that, of course, we know we have to decarbonize, right? The big question is, where is the electricity going to come from? So that's what we're starting to answer in this forum. And we're starting to answer it in terms of locally too, regionally, right? Because historically we have looked to Hydro One to basically take care of us. We've been the kids, they've been the parent.
Right.
That is totally changing in terms of utilities across North America. So what they are looking at, what utilities are looking at, are whole different ways of supplying power to us. And so they're looking at things like storage. Mississippi Mills now has
Like the battery storage thing?
battery storage
Okay.
going in. We have Compass coming to talk about that. We've had mention of Smith Falls and its water tank. Could it be used for electricity storage? Don't know, but anyway, that's a consideration. Distributed power, the notion of storing power in our EV batteries and tapping into that if we need. There's all sorts of things around storage. Anyway, so we have a series of speakers. We have Ralph Torrey coming, who is one of Canada's leading knowledgeable people on all of this stuff. He's the lead researcher at Corporate Knights, which is the Canadian organization that looks at the greening of corporations around the world and knows something about investing too in those corporations. We have Steve Lapp, as I've mentioned. We had him at our formative meeting 4 years ago. He's fabulous at looking at how we can actually manage the transition away from carbon using cars and everything else and through to using electricity. He'll be talking specifically about Ontario. We have Art Hunter from Manatik, who will talk to us about a whole microgrid, community microgrid system that they have operating there and is tied into the whole grid system. We have OREC, the Ottawa Renewable Energy Cooperative, which will talk about how we as individuals can invest in solar, how we can create more solar farms in Eastern Ontario. We are, Lanark, Leeds and Grenville, are the solar capital of Southern Ontario. That's why we have so many solar farms right now and can have more. The IESO has contracted storage, battery storage systems, and is looking to contract more renewable energy, and so that's something that OREC will be talking about. And as I mentioned, we have Compass, the company that is building the battery storage system. So, and we will have a forum at the end. We'll be asking all those speakers to address what do we do in Lanark County and Smith Falls then. We have now a developing opportunity to actually influence the system that we want here. We don't have to be the child anymore. And we should be trying to influence, because if we want to have secure electricity supply going forward with climate crises and and greater opportunities of power outages, then we need to be grabbing this opportunity. There's opportunities in there too, Peter, too, for municipalities to understand how they can be making money off of this. So,
Okay,
there.
thank you.
Yeah.
So are the MP and MPP coming?
I can't tell you that. I don't know off the top of my head right now.
Right.
Certainly, we have a number of local councillors, regional councillors
Right.
coming. Yes.
Because in Kingston, the Liberal MPP was
Mark
in alternate
Garrison.
energy before, and he's still involved, yeah. And I think that, you know, it's important, we got to get the politicians
Yeah.
to see the ground level of support and demand, yeah.
That's why we've been frankly focusing on the county and municipal politicians, Peter, is to get them
It's at
engaged.
the Legion, right?
Yes.
And then reach out to the counselor, yeah.
It's $20 just for lunch to gather, even. Yep.
Will it be live streamed?
No, we are recording it, and it's just a matter of the technology.
Yeah.
We
Are we gonna put it on
recording
YouTube?
We will be putting it up on YouTube after, yeah. But the forum part at the end, where they're all addressing what we can be doing in Bladder County and Sioux Falls will be, I think,
I wish I could attend. It's the weekend. I gotta take care of my kids. But if you're able to ask them that question in terms of what do you think is a realistic phase-in of e-vehicles, I would love to hear his answer.
Steve is the guy.
Yeah, please, if you just get the 4, 5 years out, 10 years, 15 and 20, that's what we need to do the model.
Suggestion, why don't you send her your questions so she can ask on your
Yeah.
behalf?
Yeah, that's basically it, just the projection.
Yeah.
Well, I'm sure that's what he will address in his talk, because that's what he did 4 years ago. We don't have that talk up on our website anymore. I wish we did, because it was really good. Anyway, yeah.
Peter?
Yeah, sorry, this is something beyond the time. I remember we changed the makeup of this committee so that we can accommodate 2 young people.
Yeah,
And was there any?
No.
Okay.
but
So-
I'm sure
so-
we can reach out again and ask.
Yeah.
Well,
The suggestion. Well, actually, what I remember was the committee. The young peoples were very targeted and limited to only 17.
Yeah, I think under 16 you're not a voting member.
Yeah. But my thinking, you know, on my left is a young person. He may not be 17.
Oh, well,
Right. And in fact, I was impressed. I'll tell you what I know about this chap. He volunteered in the shoreline cleanup.
oh nice.
Heard about the way have a Voyager can do for CPC. Okay. And he came and joined with his 3 other friends. And then the cleanup was on Saturday. On Sunday, he was in North Granville Sustainability Fair.
Cool.
And, you know, if we have more young people like him, our future is in good hands.
Well, I think if we're able to, let's say, engage schools, reaching out and having some sort of student present participation.
Because reaching out to school is almost now.
Yep.
If you're all limited to 17, you are only maximum of 1 year. And
you mean like
the
on
question
the
I raised this one here is he approached the Director of Education. This could be one topic that we want to bring up, right? And so do you still want to limit to 17, which is more or less grade 12, the graduating year, that they be very busy.
Fair enough. But those are just the rules right now. So I can speak with Carrie about the procedure and seeing what our options are. But I think what we could do is probably reach out to the schools either way and just promote. Because we will still accept members. Even though they're not necessarily voting members, they're being a part of the conversation is still helpful, no?
Yeah. So what I would mention is actually committee of this type is actually wanting to get involvement of young people. And it doesn't matter which one, but no, usually because of our meeting, it would have to be local student, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, thanks.
Okay, any other questions or comments before we adjourn? No? Okay. So I just recommend the motion to adjourn this meeting at 3:40.
Okay.
Moved
Good.
by Nate, seconded by Sue, because I looked at you. All in favor? Okay.
Awesome.
Adjourned.
Thank you guys.
Thank
This is really productive.
This meeting.
Touched on that was coming up in live stream.
But you know, if we were in grade 12, how would you feel?
Well, I saw that post on Facebook.
Wow, I'm
Long weekend in May is
Tell
it?
me.
I mean, it
We
was,
started in January, we
So,
had no idea.
oh,
I don't know.
okay, so a couple of things.
What did we
That
do?
meeting
It's
is
early
on
though,
Saturday.
like it
It's
feels
good.
early for the long weekend.
Donna had
So,
Yeah, like,
planned to put the
is
whole gardens
24th
in.
not
If
like
I
next
send you
We do it
the
every long
Sunday?
weekend.
you can
So in my
register.
brain,
But
I'm like,
I have it in my book. I've read the poster with
Yeah, I
a
send
lot
you
of
the link
interest.
and then you look at it.
yeah, like
Would you
to me
also
that's
like to
He's
too
retired
short.
from
These
Southern
four weekends should be that weekend.
Like the rest of the guys have music.
Yeah, that is
Yeah,
big.
yeah.
Beginning, so it doesn't, it wasn't that bad, it was more about